Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. The top headlines tonight. The latest GDP figures are out. The GDP grows 8.7% from its worst contraction ever. The GDP is now 1.5% above pre-COVID pandemic levels, but the January to March quarter was the worst in 21-22 at just 4.1%. The first arrest in the Moose Wala murder from Uttarakhand. Thousands today at the funeral of 28-year-old Sidhu Moose Wala. His father offers his pagdi as a sign of respect to the huge crowds. He's in tears. Meanwhile, the court asked the state to explain security withdrawal and publicity for the withdrawal to the young singer, and more singers now ask for police security. 36-year-old teacher Rajni Bala shot near her school in Kashmir. Terrorists targeting Kashmiri Pandits again. Women and children are the latest casualties of these terrorist killings as Kashmiri Pandit government employees plead to be transferred from the Kashmir Valley. Media barons versus Congress candidates in 2 states. The BJP backs media honchos versus the Congress. Z and NewsX promoters will be contesting versus Pramod Tiwari in Rajasthan and Ajay Markan in Haryana. 8-year anniversary celebrations. The Prime Minister's focus is Mission Himachal, which goes to elections later this year. From Atki, Latki, Bhatki schemes, he says, to startups under the Modi government. The Delhi Chief Minister backs his Health Minister currently in jail. He reaches out to his family saying, Bhabiji, be brave. We know that he's innocent. We are patriots. Meanwhile, the court sends Satyendar Jain to custody till the 9th of June. And after 2 months, the Shanghai lockdown ends tomorrow. 20 million people can leave their homes tomorrow. Why it's good news for the world is because Shanghai is a major goods supplier globally. Well, our lead story tonight is the latest growth numbers which are out, the GDP numbers. Priyanshi has the details. So, Priyanshi, there's good and bad news.
Well, yes, Sonia, both good and bad news from the GDP numbers released today. And as we know, financial year 2020 was a year full of challenges, especially the last quarter. And the report card of the Indian economy is now out. Now, there's both good and bad news as we discussed. The GDP has grown by 8.7%, which is the highest rate we've seen since the year 2000 when it stood at 8.8%. But, and there's a big but here, the growth is from a low base. It's an 8.7% growth after a 6.6% contraction in the financial year 2021. That was, of course, due to the pandemic. But it sure is good news that we're now finally above pre-pandemic levels. The economy stood at 145.2 lakh crore before the pandemic year, and it then dropped to 135.6 lakh crore in 2020 to 21, and it is now pegged at 147.3 lakh crore. So it is an 8.7% GDP growth, since the comparison is with that low base of 135 lakh crore, but we're actually just 1.5% above pre-pandemic levels. And as suspected, the Jan to March quarter this year was the worst hit in the entire financial year. GDP growth slowed to 4.1% in quarter 4, down from 5.1% in the quarter before that. So we can see the impact of the Omicron wave and price rise with supply disruptions following from the Ukraine war. And in fact, to get you the details of quarter 4, 4 GDP indicators witnessed a fall in the Jan to March quarter. Production of crude oil was down by 2.7%. Total telephone subscribers went down by 2.9%. Purchase of private vehicles was down by a significant 19.2%. Cargo handled at major seaports also witnessed a fall in this challenging quarter. Now, how do the numbers fare against estimates? The Reserve Bank of India had estimated the GDP to grow at 9.5% annually, and it expected a 6.1% quarter 4 growth. NSO had also estimated the annual GDP growth to be at 8.9%, while that for Q4 at 4.8%. So the GDP growth is in fact well below estimates.
So thanks for that detailed explanation, Priyanshi. But interestingly, the government is actually pegging this as India bounces back. So the chief economic advisor says that he's picking up very encouraging signs from this.
That's right, Sonia. The government has said that this 8.7% rate shows that India indeed is bouncing back and it is upwards and onwards. It said that with this rate, India becomes the world's fastest growing economy, well above China at 8.1%, the UK at 7.4% and the US at 5.7%. The chief economic advisor was also very optimistic, and in fact he said that Q4 growth is better than what they had expected. Let's listen in.
So the GDP growth year on year in fiscal Q4 21-22 at 4.1% was better than what many had anticipated in the private sector because of concerns about the impact caused by the Omicron wave in January, which lingered partially into February as well. And about 2% of the 7% inflation rate that we are looking at is coming from imported price pressures. And these inflation pressures will remain elevated because as we speak, the global crude oil price is heading back towards $120.
That was the chief economic advisor there at the corner of that screen briefing. But it's interesting what he said about crude oil prices, because we've seen global markets today hit by, again, bad news of growing inflation globally.
That's right, Sonia. Crude oil and inflation both remain in focus for the world economy right now. It is hitting the economy and markets across the globe. Global markets today declined after Eurozone's inflation hit a record 8.1%. European markets fell over 0.5%, while back at home, Sensex lost 359 points to end at 55,566, while Nifty went down by 76 points to close at 16,584. Banking and financial stocks face the worst decline today. And to get you a perspective on oil prices as well, oil prices spiked after EU leaders agreed to ban 90% of Russian crude oil by the end of this year. The European Union gets almost 25% of its oil from Russia. Hence, this ban is significant for the global oil market. It pushed up Brent crude prices to $120 per barrel, and with this, Brent crude price is up by over 26% in just 3 months since the war started in Ukraine. So those were all the headlines from the world of the economy and the markets. Back to you.
Thanks, Priyanshi. So a lot of news and figures there, which has an impact on, well, the daily lives of people across India and globally with rising inflation. But let's go across the other big headline. And today, thousands turned out for a tearful farewell to young singer, 28-year-old Sidhu Moose Wala. His parents broke down as their son made his final journey. In fact, he was dressed as a groom by his mother, as an unmarried Punjabi young man. Traditionally, he was dressed as a groom, and his father, you can see there, taking off his pagri as a sign of respect to the huge crowds, all fans, young people who had gathered there, many of them in tears at the brutal killing and the funeral today of Sidhu Moose Wala.
A final goodbye from parents and thousands of fans.
Funeral pyre here which has not yet cooled down, and what we got to know from people here, they say that Sidhu Moose Wala also sang songs to glorify mother, to glorify relationships, he has also sung song over religious issues. He has also sung song over other issues other than gun and violence, as his critics claim.
A large crowd outside singer-politician Sidhu Moose Wala's house in Punjab's Mansa district. His parents inconsolable. His family decorated Sidhu Moose Wala's famous tractor 5911 with his photograph, and his body was transported on it to his ancestral field for cremation, where his last rites were performed by his father, who witnessed his murder. His fans spoke about him.
उनके गानों को लेकर काफ़ी क्रिटिसिज्म बोला गया, गन कल्चर को प्रमोट करते हैं, बट ऐसा नहीं है. मेरा एक यार दोस्त था, ऑल इंडिया रैंक 100, सिलेक्शन नहीं हुआ था उस साल उसका, आके रोने लग गया IAS एग्ज़ाम में, आके रोने लग गया, गाड़ी में बैठा, कहता चश्मे लगाए उसने, कहता मूसे वाला लगा दे, अगले साल फिर तैयारी करेंगे। He got selected next year, rank 23.
ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਵੱਡੇ ਰੂਪ, ਬੜਾ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਭਰਾ ਸੀ ਸਾਰੇ, ਚੱਲ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਆ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ, ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਾਣ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ।
2 days after his killing, the culprits are still at large. Gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, who along with Goldie Brar has taken responsibility for the murder, was questioned by the Delhi police today in Tihar jail. Lawrence Bishnoi has moved court asking that he not be handed over to the Punjab police, as he fears he might be killed in a fake encounter.
आके पुलिस प्रेशर में, आके पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर में मेरे क्लाइंट के साथ कोई मिसहैपनिंग कर दे। हम फेयर ट्रायल के लिए तैयार हैं, फिर इन्वेस्टिगेशन के लिए तैयार हैं, हर तरीके से इन्वेस्टिगेशन में कोऑपरेट करने को तैयार हैं, लेकिन मेरी सुरक्षा मेरा राइट है, तो इसी सुरक्षा को मांगने के लिए मैंने हाई कोर्ट में रिट पिटीशन फाइल की है।
As they say, singer Sidhu Moose Wala embarks on his final journey. But his death also reminds each one of us that how mindless violence can cut down a young promising life like Sidhu Moose Wala. And the government, society and each one of us will have to contribute to ensure that such incidents don't happen in future in Punjab. In Mansa with camera person Ashwini Mehra, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
But today the Punjab and Haryana High Court have also issued notices to the Punjab government asking why security was withdrawn for Sidhu Moose Wala and why the decision to withdraw that security was publicised as well. Meanwhile, Punjabi singers are now speaking out about the threats they face every day. Today, popular singer AP Dhillon said that Punjabi artists deal with hate threats just to do what we love to do. He said that Sidhu made it look easy and stayed true. Singer Mankirat Aulak has also said that he's received threats and has now asked the government for more security. But moving from this tragedy to another shocking killing, this time in Kashmir, where a 36-year-old teacher, Rajni Bala, was shot just 50 meters outside her school in a targeted killing as terrorists have been targeting Kashmiri Pandits. Women and children are the latest casualties of these terrorists, and Kashmiri Pandits are now pleading to be transferred out of the Kashmir Valley.
Minutes before she could enter this school to start teaching, Rajni Bala was shot by terrorists. There is a sense of shock and disbelief among her colleagues, with whom she had worked with for the last 7 years. The teachers at the government high school at Gopalpura say the morning assembly was on when they heard gunshots and eventually found Rajni shot less than 50 meters from the school.
अभी स्कूल पहुंची नहीं थी तो उसकी क्या हो गई।
तो आपने कब देखा?
साथ मेरे 7 साल से हमारे साथ।
7 साल से आपके? कभी कुछ नहीं, उसके बच्चे भी हैं?
एक बच्ची है उसकी, बस 8 दिन पहले वो हमारे साथ एक्सकर्शन पर थी।
जी जी।
एक साथ थी, एक साथ खाया, एक साथ खेला, एक साथ घूमे, क्या पता था।
Rajni Bala, who was teaching in this school for last 7 years, was killed right outside this school, in the middle of orchards in Kulgam district. It has shocked everybody. Kashmiri Pandits are protesting. They have given ultimatum to government that they should be relocated within 24 hours. Otherwise, they will migrate to Jammu.
Saima, Rajni's colleague and friend who is inconsolable, is asking the government to save Hindu employees from targeted killings.
हमारी तरफ से हमें ज़्यादा मीडिया फेस नहीं करते, जो बाकी है ना आप उनके लिए प्लीज़ कोई सेफ्टी का वो कराइए। बेचारों को वहाँ जम्मू ट्रांसफ़र कराइए, वो भी इतने दहशत में थे, मतलब उनको सेव करके बस ये आप वो बेचारी गई अब इंशाल्लाह वो शहीद की हो गई, वो फरिश्ता लेडी थी, बाकी जो है उनको सेव रखिए, बस ये आप मैसेज दे दीजिए।
In Srinagar and several other parts of Kashmir, around 4,000 Kashmiri Pandit employees intensified protests demanding their immediate relocation. These employees have refused to attend their duties after the killing of Kashmiri Pandit government employee Rahul Bhatt inside a magistrate's office early this month.
हमने एक डिसीजन लिया है कि अगर 24 घंटे के अंदर सरकार ने कोई भी ठोस फैसला हमारे लिए नहीं लिया तो हम लोग 24 घंटे के अंदर वैली से पलायन करेंगे और मास माइग्रेशन दोबारा होगी।
The police say they will go after the attackers and neutralize them soon, but that's little comfort for migrant employees who stay in the valley. With Nazir Masoodi in Kulgam, Bureau Report, NDTV.
Tragic visuals there with that teacher killed, her family and friends mourning what's just the latest in a series of targeted killings. In other news, 8-year celebrations for the Modi government, and the Prime Minister today was in Simla. The focus also on Mission Himachal Pradesh, with the state going to elections later this year along with Gujarat.
A day after the BJP celebrated 8 years of Modi rule, the Prime Minister hit the campaign trail in poll-bound Himachal Pradesh. The state of particular challenge to the BJP. Party chief JP Nadda, who's a native of Himachal too, has camped almost every month, doing roadshows and reaching out to the people. And now the turn of Modi, the Prime Minister clearly in campaign mode.
फाइल जैसी चली जाती है, मैं प्रधानमंत्री नहीं रहता हूं, मैं सिर्फ और सिर्फ 130 करोड़ देशवासियों के परिवार का सदस्य बन जाता हूं, आप ही के परिवार के सदस्य के रूप में, एक प्रधान सेवक के रूप में.
Modi did not shy away from taking potshots at the opposition, questioning dynasty rule, saying that the BJP government in the state initiated and implemented policies on the ground, unlike what he said were atki, bhatki and latki policies of the past.
लूट और खसोट की बात होती थी भाई भतीजेवाद की, बात होती थी अटकी लटकी फटकी योजनाओं की. आज चर्चा होती है सरकारी योजनाओं से मिलने वाले लाभ की. आज चर्चा होती है दुनिया में भारत के स्टार्टअप की. आज चर्चा होती है, वर्ल्ड बैंक भी चर्चा करता है भारत के ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस की.
The BJP faces an uphill task in Himachal of retaining another term. The state saw the Congress sweeping by-elections last year, which was seen as an impact of the farm law agitation. The party hopes this outreach will help in the upcoming elections. The Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party, the two main challengers for the BJP, are not amused. They say the repeated visits are an indication that the BJP is unsure of its win. The state goes to polls with Gujarat later this year. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And AAP has said that the Himachal Pradesh elections is the reason why their health minister in Delhi, Satyendar Jain, is currently in jail. The Delhi chief minister today backed the health minister strongly. He also reached out to his family, saying, Bhabiji, be brave, and to his children, because we are patriots. The court, meanwhile, has sent Satyendar Jain to custody till the 9th of June.
सर कटा सकते हैं, वो भ्रष्टाचार नहीं करेंगे.
The Delhi Chief Minister coming out strongly today in support of his 57-year-old Health Minister Satyendar Jain. Mr. Kejriwal himself, an ex-income tax officer, said he had been through all the papers related to Mr. Jain's case and there was no evidence against him, saying he will come out stronger with this personal outreach to his family.
इनके ऊपर लगाए गए सारे आरोप फर्जी हैं. हम कट्टर ईमानदार और देशभक्त लोग हैं. हम लोग भ्रष्टाचार को देश के साथ गद्दारी मानते हैं. सर कटा सकते हैं, वो भ्रष्टाचार नहीं करेंगे. भाभी जी, आपके पति बेहद साहसी हैं. बच्चों, आपके पिता बेहद साहसी हैं.
In court today, heated exchanges between the Enforcement Directorate and the Defence Council. The agency asked for 2 weeks custody of Mr. Jain, alleging he was not cooperating with the investigation. The council, appearing for Mr. Jain, retorted he has appeared 6 times promptly before the agency whenever he was summoned. The BJP is now attacking AAP for keeping Satyendar Jain in the Delhi cabinet, asking why there are different standards in Punjab and Delhi, where Punjab's health minister was recently sacked on corruption charges.
पूरा देश कह रहा है, पापी आप. जहां-जहां आपके कदम पड़ते हैं, वहां पे भ्रष्टाचार मिलता है.
Meanwhile, 84-year-old former JNK CM Farooq Abdullah was also questioned by the Enforcement Directorate in Srinagar today for 3 hours in the alleged Jammu and Kashmir Cricket Association funds misappropriation case, the latest in a series of opposition leaders to face the central agency's questions.
मैं कुछ नहीं बताऊंगा क्योंकि ये काम चलता जाएगा. इलेक्शन जब तक होते जाएंगे, ये लोग हम लोगों को तंग करते जाएंगे.
While the opposition parties allege that the central agencies are being misused against them, the central agencies say that every action is based on evidence collected during the course of investigation, and that's why courts send the accused to their custody instead of letting them out. With camera person Pujaria, this is Arvind Kejriwal for NDTV.
And moving now to all the excitement for the Rajya Sabha that draws the final day of nominations today. But the sudden last-minute surprises came as two media barons entered the fray versus Congress candidates in Rajasthan and Haryana. The BJP has fielded Aziz Subhash Chandra in Rajasthan against Pramod Tiwari, and Kartikeya Sharma of News X, the son of a BJP leader, is contesting against Ajay Maken in Haryana.
The Rajya Sabha elections in two wildcard entries. Media baron Subhash Chandra and businessman Kartikeya Sharma as independents in Rajasthan and Haryana is giving the Congress a run for its money. In Rajasthan, the Congress was sitting pretty in the 4 seats. They had put up 3 candidates, Mukul Vasnik, Randeep Singh Surjewala and Pramod Tiwari. And the BJP won. But Chandra is the 5th entry and he will now create a contest in the 4th seat, facing off with Pramod Tiwari. It will need some deft political management by Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot.
तो जब इनको पता है कि हम नहीं जीत सकते तो फिर हॉर्स ट्रेडिंग का सपना देख करके योजना बना करके आप खड़े कर रहे उम्मीदवार को ये परंपरा आतंक को डालेगा आप.
The BJP's official candidate in Rajasthan is Ghanshyam Tiwari, but Chandra as an independent has the BJP batting for him.
अब इस समय में अपने पैतृक और अपनी जन्मभूमि राजस्थान में से चुनाव में भेजें, राज्यसभा का सदस्य बनाएं। तो फतेहपुर शेखावाटी में मेरा अभी भी घर है, परिवार है, मंदिर है जिसमें हम लोग साल में 6 बार जाते आते हैं। तो एक तो पहली बात ये कि राजस्थान से मैं नया नहीं हूँ।
Similarly in Haryana, where the BJP is hoping to dent the Congress's flop, Kuldeep Bishnoi is reportedly unhappy with the party, and Kumari Shelja, who has been denied a ticket which has gone to Ajay Maken, makes the party's situation slippery. Kartikeya Sharma's entry as an independent backed by the BJP, who will give him their 9 surplus votes, could create a contest for Ajay Maken. The Congress has 31 votes in Haryana, but it's too close for comfort. In Maharashtra, there are 6 seats going to the polls, which could test the Shiv Sena MVA alliance. The BJP can win 2 on its own. The NCP, Congress and Shiv Sena 1 each. The contest is now on for the 6th seat between BJP's Dhananjay Mahadik and Shiv Sena's Sanjay Pawar. Each candidate needs 42 votes to win. The BJP will have 24 surplus votes and will be eyeing defections in MVA and support of smaller parties and independents, while the Shiv Sena is banking on support from the MVA. The BJP will also this time not give a single ticket to a Muslim candidate. The terms of MJ Akbar, Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi and Syed Zafar Islam get over, but the BJP has decided against repeating a Muslim face. In Uttar Pradesh, 8 BJP candidates have filed their Rajya Sabha nominations. Of the 11 seats in UP, the BJP are in a position to win 8. The SP is likely to win 3. The BJP's candidates also include the ex-Gorakhpur MLA who vacated his seat for CM Aditya Nath. With Akhilesh Sharma, Harsha Kumari Singh, NDTV.
Well, let's move to the big international headline, and that is that after 65 days, Shanghai will open up. The lockdown here ends tomorrow. Almost 20 million residents were shut down and they can finally leave their homes tomorrow. Why it's good news globally is, of course, because Shanghai is a major goods supplier to the world, from cell phone parts to car parts and semiconductors. The Shanghai lockdown had impacted the entire world.
Shanghai has begun to emerge from a lockdown that has constrained the global economy and created even more turmoil for supply chains. The tough restrictions hit businesses in the manufacturing and commercial hub as factories were shut and truckers struggled to move goods in and out of Shanghai due to restrictions on movement. Those in Shanghai will now be allowed to move around freely in areas deemed low risk for COVID-19. There is a strict caveat for residents who are planning to take public transport and enter public venues, as they will have to get COVID tests every 72 hours to gain entry. China is alone among major countries enforcing an uncompromising zero COVID policy. The bad news remains China's jobless rate. It rose to 6.1% in April, the highest level since the 6.2% peak seen in the early part of the COVID-19 pandemic in February 2020. The prolonged isolation has fueled public anger and rare protests inside Shanghai and battered the city's manufacturing and export-heavy economy, disrupting supply chains in China and around the world and slowing international trade. Even if the lockdown ends on schedule, its effects on the economy, public health and trust in government could last much longer. Parmeshwar Bawa for NDTV.